In 1798, there was a tussle going on between France and Britain to become a superpower. 9 years ago, France had lost the king because of these clubs. After this, Britain and Russia were the two biggest powers of Europe, where the king was either at war or was supporting his opponents. In such a situation, a French commander, Napoleon Bonaparte, got a far-fetched idea. He thought, why not capture the exit at Egypt, the confluence of Asia and Africa, and then from there reach Hindustan and get hold of the gold and silver bird. Tipu Sultan was in this situation. There was only a small Jiminy strip in between, which could be dug to join these two seas. In this way, a shortcut for trade and military occupation could also be opened between Asia and Europe. That is, a new world order could be created through France. At that time, France had a weak government, which allowed this powerful commander Napoleon Bonaparte to build Mohenjo in Egypt. What else could he do? So in 1798, this commander, with a powerful army of foreigners and about 40,000 soldiers, he set out to conquer Egypt. This country, that is Egypt, was under the control of the emperor at that time. Till the time of the Ottomans, Ibrahim was ruling from the Ottoman side. Egypt, or the Ottomans, did not have the strength to compete with a power like France, but they had the full support of the superpower Britain. Now, on one hand, he was successful in establishing the top commander of France. Friends, before reaching Egypt, Napoleon had to face a big problem. The name of this problem was Abdul Karna. He was the vice admiral of the British Royal Navy and was monitoring the Egyptian coast with his army to stop Napoleon from reaching Egypt. But luckily for Napoleon, Admiral Nelson could not find him, and he reached the Egyptian port, also known as Sikandar or Alexandria, with a French army in July 1798. A small number of Malouk troops were present to protect the city, seeing which, the city was crowned with a banner of victory and many villages were encroached upon. In one village, 900 people were killed. After this, their wives and children were burned alive inside their houses. On hearing the news of the French army's capture, the villages near Cairo were emptied. Then in Cairo too, the situation worsened with the news of Napoleon's attack. Most of the population left the city. There was silence in the streets and markets. Both the chiefs of Mishra, Murad, and Ibrahim were present in Cairo and were gathering troops to fight the French. But this was also not an organized army. Most of the soldiers were those poor farmers who had only a knife or a tool to cut the distance, etc., in the name of weapons. They had guns but did not have the experience of fighting an organized army. It looked like a fight between an elephant and a tongs. There was nothing like this, but first of all, the French forces were at a place in Subarkaith, 147 kilometers away from Cairo. Otherwise, thousands of soldiers under the command of Murad Day attacked the French army, but obviously the French were more powerful than them, so this attack was repulsed. After this trouble, the Mughals got a boost, and instead of nation-building, they started fighting with a non-traditional triangle. In the extreme heat of the month of July, the French army was traveling in the Sahara. The only source of water for them was the Nile, which was flowing along their path, but the Mughal soldiers were guarding the river in boats. As soon as any of the French soldiers moved towards them, they would rain bullets on them and force them to run away. Due to this, the French army had a shortage of water. Some soldiers, exhausted by thirst, died on the way. Some even committed suicide due to thirst and heat. Many soldiers, instead of drinking water, started plucking watermelons from the fields and drinking their juice, but this was not enough. French forces were getting demoralized due to these small activities. But Napoleon's army was not able to quench its thirst. Reading the courage of the soldiers, they kept moving ahead in a very organized manner. On July 21st, the French army had reached such a place, near Kahar, where they could see only the peak of Ram Mishra from a distance. When Commander Napoleon saw Ram Mishra, he told his companions, "Look, the praise of 40 centuries is looking at you." That is, he was telling his soldiers that you have not come to explore any useless place, but to capture a place of great importance. This is not an ordinary destination. He wanted to tell this to his army. The French army had taken a position in a village on the other side of the Nile, where the French army was present. In front of this position, the Topan was standing, and behind it the cavalry squad was ready to attack the enemy. Behind this army, on the bank of Makhar, that is, on the side of Kahar city, the Second Egyptian Army was present under the command of Ibrahim B. Most of these were infantry soldiers who had taken position along the bank of the river. They also had boats. These soldiers could also send power to Murad when needed. The total strength of Murad B and Ibrahim B was at least 20,000, whereas Napoleon Bonaparte had a base of 25,000 troops. He had left some troops there to protect the areas. So Napoleon's army had to face Murad's army first, which was positioned in the villages. By giving some troops to them, they could cross the Nile and attack the enemy's other army. Napoleon Bonaparte made his army stand in the shape of different boxes. This military technique was called square. 5 such boxes, or 5 squares, were made. In every square, there were 6 infantrymen who had guns, and these guns had long rifles with which they could harm the enemies. Behind the rows of infantry, there were 2 regiments inside the square, in between which the food and ammunition was kept safe. There were cannons on all the 4 corners of the square, so that heavy shelling could be done on the enemy from any side. Every square was a complete army in its place which could use its weapons from all sides. So, friends, the fighting forces first fired bullets on the French front from the 10th, then at least 6,000 horsemen were in the pocket of the French army, but they had just come a little ahead when the French forces opened their fire. The cannons standing on the corners of the skerries had a range more than the Egyptian cannons. Dozens of bullets were fired on the Egyptian ranks, causing a commotion. Many Egyptian horsemen fled as soon as the first shots were fired. Some of the Egyptian soldiers who had come too close to the skerries were shot by the infantry. It is said that the Egyptian army was moving like dates fall from blood. Egypt became a Mander Murad. They changed their positions again and again. Sometimes they tried to attack the enemy from behind. Sometimes their horsemen squads would come in between the squares, but this square position was not theirs. When they attacked the enemy from the front, the alert French soldiers standing on the side would shower bullets on them. Many houses were destroyed by the enemy forces, suffering heavy losses. Many soldiers crossed the river on horses or in boats. But friends, the war was not over yet. The Egyptians had a position in the village. There were still 1,500 soldiers, and many razakars, i.e., villagers who had been recruited in the army, were present there. The French army surrounded this village from all sides. The soldiers present inside were asked to surrender, but the Egyptians refused to surrender. On this, the French forces attacked the village. Now the fight that was going on was on. The French stopped them with guns and bullets and jumped into the river, but they were also attacked. Very few Egyptian soldiers could reach the banks of the river towards Cairo. For many days, the bodies of the attackers kept floating in the river, and the French soldiers managed to drive them out. The Egyptian soldiers under the command of the French army were trapped while on the river. Ibrahim Bouakif did not even get a chance to help them. Nearly 1,600 Egyptian soldiers lost their lives in the battle. The Egyptian army commander Murad was also injured in the battle. But he was successful in fighting the Egyptians. The French had to face difficulties in fighting the French, and the property of about 260 chieftains was freed. After the trouble of the French, the infantry present on the Nile also fled. Both the governors of Egypt, Ibrahim and Murad, went to different places in the Egyptian capital and kept fighting the French on their own. Later, Ibrahim went to Egypt while Murad remained in Egypt and continued guerrilla activities against the Allied forces. 12 friends, after the Battle of the Pyramids, the city of Cairo had become devastated to a large extent. Some of the Egyptian soldiers had also attacked the city before leaving it and had also killed many of their own people. On July 27th, Napoleon entered Cairo with his army, and with the help of the army, the common people who had left the city were also brought back and Cairo was repopulated. Friends, in less than a month, the country was which had not been destroyed by any other power after the arrival of Islam. It was never captured till now. There was a commander who had set a new milestone by hoisting the French flag in Egypt. But this capture had obviously proved to be a piece of cake for them. They had easily defeated the weak rustic army. This fight was won by friends. But now, after this, there was to be a fight with Napoleon. Now, there was an army whose commander was a renowned player of the battlefield, and they had better reach. They were not on the rocks, but they were continuously patrolling the Sali area of Egypt with their boats, and were looking for French ships. Their aim was to destroy these ships and cut off Napoleon Bonaparte's supply line from France. Without this supply line, they could not maintain the French hold on Egypt. Admiral Nelson would get the French fleet, that is, the ships that had come to Egypt with Napoleon are present in the area of Abu Qir near the city of Alexandria. Nelson immediately sent his son forward and reached the enemy on August 1st. He attacked the French navy so fiercely that the enemy did not have much fun. This battle is also called the Battle of the Nile. In this battle, at least 10 big French level ships and many small French ships were destroyed. The French fleet was destroyed by this battle and Napoleon's supply line was broken. There was also a cartoon on this issue in Britain in which the French were shown as crocodiles, whom Admiral Nelson was tying up and killing to eat. So, friends, Napoleon Bonaparte was still in control of Egypt, but in reality, he had become a Muslim in Egypt, and the British commander who had attacked was such that due to the blockade in the sea, he could not even get any help from his country, France. The people of Egypt were also now ready to revolt against him, because the Ottomans had turned against France. Outside Egypt, in the sea, there was a fleet in the navy which was standing with the Turkish forces and was trying to enter Egypt. So that Napoleon could not take the decision, Napoleon Bonaparte had to keep the Egyptian Muslims happy during this time and keep them with him. He made many desperate efforts to meet the Muslims. He started making loud noises in favor of Islam. He started taking regular opinion of ulama in national matters. He started pretending to meet the religious leaders of Muslims on government occasions. He also released a fund of 300 francs for Muslims to celebrate the festival of Milad an-Nabi. He himself also participated in this festival. The French storm also paid homage to Prophet of Islam Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Pleased with these words, some Muslims started calling Napoleon by the name of Ali Bonaparte instead of his real name. Due to respect for Islam, some Muslim friends have even today fallen prey to the misunderstanding that maybe Napoleon had become a Muslim. So according to his private secretary Rousseau Antony, who used to stay with him all the time, according to the book he wrote, Napoleon's attachment to Islam was only for political benefit because he had been convinced, and he needed the help of the inner Muslims in any condition, in some way or the other. From Misri, Napoleon Bonaparte was trying to win the sympathies of the Muslims. He used to participate in the religious festivities of the Muslims only as a spectacle. He never memorized a single verse of the Quran and never stayed in a mosque. He used to laugh at his fears about religion in private gatherings. The conversation that Napoleon Bonaparte had with the Muslims about accepting Islam was meant to be taken up in the conversation. He was not serious at all. If he used to talk or act like a Muslim, he used to do so only because he thought that he was the military and political leader of a Muslim country. But friends, all this did not give him any political advantage. He wanted to get the advantage because he said that despite his venomous attachment to Islam, Bonaparte would not be able to make the people of Egypt his fans. In October 1798, when he was out of the city, there was a large-scale revolt in Cairo. The center of this revolt is the famous Zamana Tariq-i-Islami. Thousands of lions started attacking the French soldiers. In these attacks, many French officers were killed along with their soldiers. Big stone benches were broken, and animals were hit with these stones with similar weapons. Thousands of lions entered the city. Napoleon took strict action to crush this rebellion. He attacked Cairo with his army. French soldiers entered the city and broke the gates built between its different areas because these were creating obstacles in the army's movement. After this, bombing was done in the city. Jamil Azza and the areas around it were bombed, due to which many buildings were in flames. The rest started drinking rum in fear, but Napoleon replied that the time of revenge has come. They were thinking that now we will be killed, but Napoleon forgave these rebel leaders and these ulamas, but the rebels who were arrested were not forgiven. On Napoleon's orders, 30 rebels were burnt every night. They were taken off and their bodies were tied in sacks and thrown into the Nile. Many of the prisoners who were killed included women as well. So this practice of killing prisoners was stopped more than anything else. Me curious fellows, Napoleon had crushed the rebellion in Kahar, but he had understood that Egypt had become a burden for him. He wanted to get rid of it at any cost due to the daily rebellion and danger in the country. The dream he had once seen of reaching Hindustan via Egypt was now looking impossible. Now he could not help the misguided Tipu Sultan of Mysore, and neither could he help him. That is why the next year in 1799, the British captured Mysore and Tipu Sultan also lost his life while fighting. Maharana Napoleon was trapped in Egypt. His way back home to France, i.e. the way to France by sea, was blocked by the British Navy. In these circumstances, he attacked the Ottoman-controlled province, i.e. Syria, so that by putting pressure on the Turkish Caliph, a safe way to return home could be obtained for himself. He thought that the Turks, since the Khalifa were British citizens, would get worried due to an attack on Syria and tell the British that Napoleon should be allowed to go to France and the blockade of the sea should be lifted so that Napoleon could go back to his home and Egypt could also return and Syria could also return. This was Napoleon's planning. Under this planning, he left most of his army in Egypt and himself entered Syria with 13,000 soldiers and attacked. Napoleon's attack on Syria was successful in the beginning. He also captured the Palestinian city of Raja and the present Israeli city of Jaffa. Napoleon also got more than 4,000 Turkish prisoners of war who surrendered in Jaffa killed. During Napoleon's work in Jaffa, the air force failed due to which the French army also started becoming Madassar. It is said that Napoleon used to make his army habituated to Madassar soldiers from the town to keep their blood strong. He also went there. He actually wanted to show that he is not afraid of this disease, and neither should his army be afraid, because his commander is not afraid. But friends, it is said that Napoleon did not meet the patient of the town. This was actually a propaganda, which was done later. Even after the conquest of Jaffa, Napoleon's proposal continued, and he also inquired about some mosques there, but when he reached another Sali city Akkad, the Turkish army there refused to surrender. Under the command of Turkish commander Ahmed Pashazar, the Turks held the fort and fought well with the French army. Napoleon tried to capture Banana many times, but failed miserably. One reason for this was that the hat that Napoleon had was made of Hokkien. It was called Banana. The walls could not be broken, their strength was in Egypt in a big way, so what they did now was that they decided to get a huge toy ship from Egypt, but when they were coming, they were also intercepted by the British in the sea, who had blockaded the outside of Egypt. They also reached here to help the Ottomans. They also went to the city with some of their troops and led the Ottoman forces at Macon. It is said that a French soldier, Félix Broker, who had been under Napoleon Bonaparte, was also a part of the Ottoman army of Ica. His father played a very important role in making the defense of the city better. The defense of the city became so strong that despite the continuous efforts of two armies, Napoleon Bonaparte could not conquer the city and finally left after finishing the siege of the city. From here, he started moving rapidly towards Egypt. On the way, he destroyed the buildings on a large scale everywhere so that the enemy could not take advantage of them by capturing them again. So, friends, in the evening campaign, at least 1,800 French soldiers were killed and almost the same number of people were injured then, the purpose for which Napoleon had attacked Egypt, i.e. to gain a safe route, which was his target, could not be achieved, although he succeeded in extracting a promise from the Turks for the safe return of his army to France, but the British did not keep this promise. They had blockaded the sea and continued the blockade of Egypt. Due to this, Napoleon had to travel from Egypt to Egypt by land route, and obviously this charm failed completely. As soon as he left Egypt, the Ottoman army recaptured all the areas lost by them. Now with the help of Britain and their grandmother, they started preparing to attack Napoleon Bonaparte's army in Egypt. In July 1799, he landed troops in the Abu Qar area on the coast of Egypt and also took control of a fort there. Napoleon reached there running and found out the reason for this. In this battle, thousands of Turkish soldiers were trying to reach their outer ship. Many Turks who drowned in the sea were also taken as prisoners of war by the French. But the Battle of Abu Dhabi was Napoleon's last fear in Egypt. He was now trying to return to his distant home in France as soon as possible because the political situation there was getting worse. Commander Napoleon felt that he could now become the new ruler of France by capturing the government in France. You already know that at that time Napoleon Bonaparte had not become the emperor in France, but Paul Bonaparte was the most powerful player in the power struggle there. So, to gain the power of France, he decided to sacrifice Egypt. The conquest of Abu Dhabi gave Napoleon the path of defeat. This is not known from there, or it may be that Napoleon found such a successful way that he reached India by evading the blockade of the British army. Napoleon somehow reached France. In 1799, he overthrew the throne of Paris and took control of Aqaba. But even after becoming the ruler of France, he could not control his army in Egypt. Could not help. Even after Napoleon's return to France, his army remained in Egypt for the next 2 years, and the series of wars against him became more and more intense. In fact, on June 14, 1800, in Egypt, a group of commanders Salman and Hab killed French General Kleber by stabbing him with a dagger. The murderer was arrested and was brutally killed in the square of Chandra Rozgar Kahar. But now the French had been uprooted from Egypt. The new commanders who replaced the general were also equally responsible for the uprooting of the army. Then it happened that the powerful enemy of the French, i.e., Britain, defeated the French army in a Gemini battle near the city of Alexandria on March 21, 1801. The French army was trapped inside the city. The British army surrounded this blockade, and along with it the Ottomans and British also reached there and defeated the whole of Egypt. In June, Pahari was also liberated from French occupation. On September 2nd, the French army in central France, which was in the Banyat, surrendered. Napoleon in Egypt Bonaparte's entire campaign ended in shame, and he would not have to face the humiliation of surrendering. His dream of digging in Egypt and connecting the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea remained unfulfilled and was finally fulfilled after 8 years. After this failure, Napoleon prepared a new outer fleet, but in 1851, Britain destroyed this French fleet by raffling it near the Spanish coast. This was the decision that gave or made France a foreign power. After Napoleon's war, France could never become a great foreign power. But I am curious, fellows. Napoleon's dream of establishing a new world order did not end with the construction of Egypt or the raffle. Almost the whole of the east of France was open to Europe. There was no need for an external force for this fleet. Every place could be reached by land. If the new world order had to be brought, then the way would be through water. Napoleon decided to reach Europe only by land, which was the Emperor of France. He had become the emperor, and he started a war against Austria. Friends, it started which took the French emperor to the door of Russia and made France the biggest European country. But despite this, can Napoleon Bonaparte be called the destroyer of Europe? It can be called the Fatih Alam. When Napoleon Bonaparte reached Spain with the dream of a new world order, what happened to the British and how did they face this biggest threat that was emerging? We will show you all this. At the beginning of the 19th century, Europe was divided into many big factions. Britain, France, German principalities, Prussia, Austria, Hungary, Ottoman Empire, and Russia were the big powers of Europe. After the French invasion had declared war on France. Every day, there were many threats against France. In 1804, when Napoleon became the Emperor of France, the areas of Europe on which he had his eyes were fixed. These included Italy, Germany, Croatia, and many parts of Poland. He did acquire some areas in Italy and Germany, but for the rest of the areas, he had to go to Australia. And they had to fight a war with Russia, because these areas were mostly under the control of these two empires. Especially, Australia controlled most of the areas of Germany. These areas were only a part of the Roman Empire in the beginning. That is why Australia was called the Roman Empire. They also had military support from Russia and Britain. These three empires together created a new history. That is, Austria, Britain, and Russia joined them. Then many other small and big empires of Europe joined them. So, the Ottoman Empire started attacking the French-occupied areas of Germany and Italy from many turfs at one time. In these circumstances, the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte could not sit idle. He attacked Austria on 48th March so that all the enemy forces could be broken before they could gather and a siege could be put on them. On the other hand, Emperor Alexander the Great reached to help Austria with a large army of Russia. How did he face the power of the French army in Spain? Video, music. Music 550 kilometers away from Vienna, there was a German city, Austria's gates. Vienna was important in the front line. Here, an Austrian commander, General Mack, had taken defensive positions with about 60,000 soldiers, while to help him a great army under the command of General Austro-Fascist General Otto was coming from the east towards Ulm. General Mack had to do only this, that is to keep the French in check in some way or the other till the arrival of General Kothega. If he succeeded and this army was to help him, then Napoleon had the strength to attack. Napoleon attacked the city in October 1851, 1852, and took more than 1,000 Austrian soldiers prisoner, while General Mack went to the city of Mysore with 27,000 soldiers. Napoleon was stunned there. Napoleon sent a message to General Mack that now there is no use of fighting, surrender your arms. If I do not get help by October 25th, then I will go to the front of the army, otherwise not. In response to this, Napoleon's representatives ordered General told the map that when G. Rishi Faji they are waiting for the arrival of the French, which is still weeks away. Before its arrival, your army will be destroyed by this news, and perhaps he himself also confirmed it. General Mack became very disappointed, and on October 20th itself, at the time of October 25th, 27,000 Australian soldiers came out of the city and threw their weapons in front of the French. When the French were brought in front of the French, this commander got his army to act in such a way that I am unlucky Commander Mack. Napoleon started well with his soldiers. In fact, he also saluted his wounded soldiers for fighting bravely. So, friends, now Napoleon Bonaparte had captured the city of Poonam. He had also made 60,000 enemy soldiers prisoners of war and had also captured 200 tanks. Due to this, the three lines of the enemy were now broken and the Australian umpire's opinion had been given on Napoleon's Raman karma. So Napoleon started moving rapidly towards the city and on 14th, he also informed him. They were present in Sherwal, quite far from Leyla. They had an army of 58,000 soldiers with 36,000 Frenchmen and 22,000 Australian soldiers. In comparison, Napoleon had 75,000 soldiers. Now, to fight Napoleon, they started moving towards him, and as soon as General Gans started moving away, the situation became such that Rishikesh was ahead and Napoleon Bonaparte was behind him. General Gans left some troops behind so that he could slow down the attack of the French and could move ahead by saving his life or take a better position. His steps were successful and he crossed the town of Flats, 155 kilometers north of Bayana, and entered the difficult mountainous areas and took a better position there. During this, he also got a new help of 30,000 Indian soldiers, that is, his total number had now increased from the French. During this, friends, Napoleon also came close to Australia. When they came to know that the enemy had more army, they made a tremendous move to trap Russia. They sent thousands of their soldiers to their own occupied areas in Australasia. In this way, their army reduced from 53,000 to 3,000. But Napoleon had given a wrong picture to the enemy that my army has become very weak. Come and attack me. When the sages came to know that Napoleon had much less army than them, they got ready to attack the battlefield, especially the Russians who had reached there. That is, they were being deceived by Napoleon. Their General Kotov advised their emperor to remain dependent on the whole of Russia, but he did not listen. The second emperor, Alexander, did not want to lose this easy opportunity. Despite General Kotov's understanding, he ordered to attack the French army. On December 2nd, the battlefield was prepared in front of the town of Austerlitz, and the sages, the army divided itself into 3 divisions and took position in the battlefield. They made their positions behind the center. Behind the center's flank there were some ponds in which the ice was frozen. Napoleon also stationed his army in 3 divisions in front of the Rishi forces, but he deliberately kept the number of his army very less on the right side. In this way, he made the Rishis believe that their right side is so weak that it can be easily destroyed. Napoleon was sure that the Rishis will fall for this deception and will send more of their forces to destroy this right side. In this way, the center of the Rio will become weak. Then the French army will attack this weak center part of the Russia and defeat it easily. When the center is destroyed, then the Rishi and elephant forces standing on the right side will also start running away. Napoleon had made another arrangement that he had secretly called a French soldier from Bayana behind him. The timing of the soldier was like this. It was set that as soon as the war starts, this force should join it. In this way, after the start of the Vichy attack, the strength of the French army was to become strong again. So with this planning, all these face-to-face battles were stopped. Yes, friends, it is known that apart from Napoleon, Russian Emperor Alexander I and Australian Emperor Francis I were also present at the time of the battle. That is why this battle is also called the Battle of Three Emperors, the Battle of the Three Empires. Friends, before the battle, Napoleon also sent a message to his soldiers. He said that if you defeat the enemy, then I will command the battle by staying away from the enemy's firing range. But if for even a moment I feel that victory is difficult, then you will see that your emperor will be killed in the next battle. He also issued a message that no soldier will sacrifice his life on the pretext of removing the wounded. Every soldier should know that it is very important to win over the soldiers of England, i.e., Britain, who hate our community. This was Napoleon's intention with the British soldiers. The British were fighting against them. The British soldiers used to say that Britain was the richest country among them, and they believed that all these kings cannot be defeated without the help of Britain. So this message of Napoleon was read out to all the military units. A new enthusiasm was created in the soldiers. They got ready to sacrifice their lives for the sake of their emperor. So with this new enthusiasm, the French army started the war. The battle began with the auspicious sound when the Shahid tune was still spreading in the air. First, the soldiers started bombarding the ranks of the French army with the Russian Ostend soldiers. Then the British started bombing the ranks of the French army with the Madhu and the Confederates. The soldiers attacked the weak right flank of the French army with full force while searching. They were sure that they would soon destroy the Allies' forces. But what happened was that during this time the French army, which was called secretly, arrived. With the arrival of this army, Napoleon's right flank became strong again. The battle started between the two armies on Napoleon's left side too. But the center of the French army was not advancing because most of its soldiers had already gone to the right flank of the French forces. Therefore, the army in the center was only in a daisy position and it did not have the strength to attack. Whereas the French army standing in front of them was more in number than them. Napoleon was just waiting for the attack to end. As soon as he got the idea, he moved his center force forward and attacked the weak right flank of the Russian center with full force. The French army first captured the hills and then defeated the center army too. Seeing the center being defeated, the army on the right and left side also ran away. But that part of the hills which was on Napoleon's right side, the French were present there, and they had to clear the ice ponds to retreat. When these soldiers started crossing the ice while running, the French started bombarding the ponds. Many bullets were fired on the frozen ice of the pond, and the ice broke. Dozens of Athati soldiers tried to cross these ponds and got drowned in the cold water. Along with them, many caps and horses also got drowned in the water. Still, a large number of soldiers somehow crossed these ponds. In this war, a total of 15,000 Vichy and Australian soldiers were injured, while 11,000 were arrested. In this battle, only 9,000 of Napoleon's soldiers won with their master strategy. What kind of a victory was this? The military alliance that had been formed against France was badly affected. After birth, the French died in a battle 80 kilometers away in the east of Vienna. Under the rule of the French Emperor Francis I, Austria made military history against France. Many areas near Austria, including the Italian city of Venice, were also handed over to the French Empire and under its control. Napoleon also imposed a war tax of 40 million francs on Austria, which he promised to pay. Napoleon also forced Francis I to give up the title of the first Roman emperor on August 6, 1866, i.e., he gave up this title and now he became the ruler of the Australian Empire by the name of Francis I. In return for all this, Napoleon did make Austria a slave. France's war with Austria and other Yugoslavia did not end. It started again after a few months. In 1894, Napoleon was arrested once again, and Australia was returned once again. From 185 to 1812, these three wars were fought from 5 to 18 and 12, i.e. For about 7 years, Napoleon achieved many great things. In 1812, the situation was that a large part of Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, maximum Spain, and Poland had come under the control of France. All these areas were either a part of the big nation French Empire, or there was a puppet government scheme of France. Napoleon divided many of these kingdoms among his brothers and relatives. One of his brothers, Joseph Bonaparte, became the King of Spain, or the present Netherlands. He was made the king of that place. His third brother, Jerome Bonaparte, was made the king of the German kingdom, Westphalia. Napoleon made another brother the king of the Italian kingdom, Naples. In this way, Napoleon's wife and sister Caroline became the Queen of the Maples. Similarly, one of his sisters, Elisa, became the queen, and another, Atal, also became the Queen of Kingdoms. Napoleon's mother, Dahlia Bonaparte, was known as Madame Mary because she was the mother of an emperor, but she was also called the luckiest mother of the world because most of her children became kings or queens. They had already started living in the forest, but what if someone casts an evil eye on so much happiness? What if something goes wrong? When Napoleon did not get the news of any soldier's death, then this happened. Friends, their happiness really started turning into a disaster. In front of their eyes, the Bonaparte family, which had gone on a journey, started becoming a victim of the question. Fan compass started falling apart. Many people had played this question in one hand that none of Napoleon's siblings was a stylish and capable leader like him. These people were unsuccessful in establishing order in the areas under their control. Revolts started against them. Especially Joseph Bonaparte, who was made the ruler of Spain, proved to be a big failure. There was a large-scale revolt against him in Spain. The brothers started snatching Spain from France with the help of Britain. For a few years, there were battles between the rebels and the French army. The British entered Spain under British command. In 1814, when was Spain completely liberated? The French could not do it because sometime before Spain's independence, Napoleon had started a military campaign against Russia as well. An army which took the French army to those Russian snowy forests from where no army had ever returned safe till date. So, what happened to Napoleon and the French army in this snowy hell? Then what happened that the French army opened fire on Napoleon Bonaparte? I will show you all this, friends, but in the next music, 1812 Napoleon. In 1812 Bonaparte had the biggest empire and the most powerful triumvirate in Europe. With this army, he was preparing to attack Russia. The reason for this was the continental system created by Napoleon. This system was created because the British Navy had blockaded France and its occupied territories from the Atlantic Ocean to the Maritime Sea. In response to this blockade, Napoleon created the continental system under which all the British were banned from trading with Britain, i.e., the trade of Britain was banned. Russia had also joined the system under Napoleon's pressure, but within a few years, some missiles arose in Russia and France, due to which the missiles became a big problem. Napoleon had promised the whole of Russia, i.e., Emperor Alexander I, that he would not let the Ottoman Sultanate's enemies go, and he would help Russia in capturing the world, i.e., today's pillar. Now, let's know the questions of friends. The world is that place which is the biggest problem of Russia. The Sea Black Sea meets Mediterranean, i.e. Mara. Therefore, for Russia, the capture of the city was of great importance. Napoleon had promised to help Russia, but now this promise was not being fulfilled because Napoleon was worried that Russia would also be in Rome. If this proved to be a threat for him, by creating a big navy like Royal Navy, i.e. British Navy, then he would have to face problems in the world affairs and loss in trade. All Russia was angry with Napoleon. He started separating from the continental system. In response to this, Napoleon attacked Russia, but he did not want to break Russia. Rather, he wanted to bring them back to the system by putting pressure on all Russia. But was Napoleon successful in making a big power like Russia bow down? And what was it that one day the French opened fire on Napoleon Bonaparte? In this video, we will show you all this. Music, friends. This hill that you are seeing, what is this sentence on the banks of Bulti State Lakshmi Rule? It is called Napoleon Hill. On June 24th, 1812, on the day of 1812, Napoleon from the hill, we were watching our great and glorious army crossing the Darya Abdul and entering Russia. It is said that in the history of Europe, such a large army had never been seen before. In the army of 4.30 lakh 450,000 soldiers, there were 80,000 horsemen and 370 soldiers. Out of these, 40,000 were cavalry, 16,000 were infantry, and 82,35 were infantry. But on June 24th, This was the number of soldiers. Why do I mention this in the paper French army? Half the soldiers were French, but the rest, remember, were not French, but were people recruited by the French Empire's Mutilaficon. They were non-French, their loyalty was also mixed. Then, among the French soldiers too, there was a large number of soldiers who had no experience of war. In fact, many of them were going to war for the first time. They were not used to difficulties. In comparison to them, even the majority of the Rishi soldiers were not used to laborers and other soldiers, but in comparison to the French soldiers, they had to face every single challenge. What was available outside was that the laborers and farmers were used to hard work and they were on their own land. Whether it rains today or snows heavily in dry weather, these people already knew how to survive in all weathers, so it was not easy to fight the enemy on their own land. It was easy to give a list to these tough fighters. Now, if the success of the French army and Napoleon's army in Russia depended on anything, then it was two things, that is, their numbers were more, and secondly, their commander Napoleon Bonaparte was a great war-winning commander. He never lost, this had become famous, but friends, a great commander like Napoleon Bonaparte he had also made a mistake that he had not made a proper planning for the attack on Russia. His intention was that if he brought such a large army to the borders of the Russian Federation, then the whole of Russia would be frightened and put to sleep, i.e. they would return to the continental system and break away from Britain. Therefore, he had stopped with his army on the banks of the Danube. He had not yet made any detailed planning for fighting the war further. This river served as the border between the Russian and French Empire. On one side of the river was Poland, and on the other side was Napoleon. Napoleon was present in Poland with his army because this was the country over which he ruled. Napoleon was waiting for a message of advice from the whole of Russia, but when no such message came, on June 24th, he crossed the Danube and declared war on the Russian areas. He thought that at the most he would advance 50 miles into Russia, and then he would rush to Russia for advice, but the whole of Russia would not be able to do anything. Friends, Napoleon was very disappointed. No message of advice came for him. Now this became a matter of concern for Napoleon that he would return only after making the French bow down. He kept moving ahead in Russia. He did not realize that the whole of Russia and its commander were deliberately giving him a chance to make a mistake. He wanted to bring the French army so deep into Russia that return would not be possible. Like us, the commander also got trapped in their plan. This was the beginning of the destruction of a great commander of a great military commander. Music. For the first 1 or 2 weeks, Napoleon's military charm continued with great success. His forces also found the city of Rivnia, called Milenius, and made it the headquarters of their supply line. Then they started moving towards Moscow, passing through present-day Belarus. Friends, let me tell you here that in those times, not Moscow but Petersburg to the north of it was the capital of Russia. The whole of Russia had not been toured. Alexander was sitting safely in that city when Napoleon Bonaparte was going towards Moscow. The reason for this was that perhaps it was because Moscow was a very dangerous city for Russia. It was the center of the Rishi and Thyrox church, and the imam knew it as sacred. Napoleon thought that seeing this city in danger, all would go to sleep or start a big war to stop them, but this was again Napoleon's misunderstanding. The message of 16 came, and he was defeated. Rather, the Russian army kept retreating in front of the French pace attack. The route from Moscow was more than 900 kilometers long, and it took 2 months to cross it. There was a need to take 4.5 lakh French soldiers to Moscow. Therefore, the Russians did this by burning down every village and farm on the way and mixing poison in the water reservoirs. Even the cattle were killed so that the French could not go hungry and thirsty. Then the Russian villagers also started guerrilla attacks on the French forces. They suddenly came from one side and attacked and killed some Frenchmen. They used to take off the army and run away with whatever ration they could get their hands on. Friends, the Russian army also started doing the same thing. Napoleon had to leave behind many troops to protect the supply line, but the French continued to attack these troops. Napoleon tried very hard to destroy a large part of the French army somehow so that they would surrender and not be merciless. If this had happened, Napoleon would not have to go to Moscow. He would have forced the whole of Russia to surrender and return to France. But the large part of the French army, which was under the command of the Supreme Commander-General, was not coming into his hands. The Russian army was continuously retreating, and in pursuit of this, Napoleon was also moving towards Moscow. Now, friends, it was the month of June-July, and it was very hot in Russia, but the French soldiers had run out of food and water. On the way also, they were not getting more water and any other help. Their supply lines were also being destroyed by hunger. The desperate army even killed all its 4 horses, but this was not enough. Such a large army was not getting the food and water it needed every day. As a result, Sudir suffered a lot due to heat, hunger, thirst, seasonal diseases, and the enemy. Thousands of soldiers lost their lives. Your peace soldiers who were not French in the army started abandoning the army and running away. Hundreds of kilometers before Moscow, France's great empire started to fail. By mid-August, the situation was such that every day 5,000 to 6,000 French soldiers were either sick or incapable of fighting or would run away. In a few months, the French army lost its 1,00,000 soldiers. Now remember, friends, this was the condition of the French army in the summer season, when the weather in Russia is cold. The winter season was yet to come, so a little before cold, on August 18, 15, in the city of Smolensk, 400 kilometers from Moscow, the French army reached close to the Russian Central Army. On this occasion, the first major battle between the Russian and French armies also took place. The fort in the city of Rishikesh was blocked. Napoleon Bonaparte had a full opportunity to surround the city and block the enemy's way to return to Moscow. In this way, a Mysore army was completely destroyed in the city of Rishikesh. And his entire army would have been destroyed, but Napoleon, for some reason, made a big military mistake, and instead of completely surrounding the city, he attacked only the city's main gate directly. That is, the other way to leave the city was bombed from the front, and after that he entered the city. During this, about 14,000 Rishi soldiers were killed, and he also lost 10,000 soldiers. After 2 days of fighting, the Rishi soldiers would move out from other routes of the city, which were not blockaded, and then move towards Moscow. Napoleon captured the city, but friends, he had to once again chase the Rishi soldiers. They were ahead with medals, and Napoleon was behind. How long would this cat-and-mouse game continue? But suddenly, Mark received a message from this emperor who changed the map of the battle. The whole of Russia had said that the enemy had got tired enough. Now Napoleon had to take a decision. A new commander was also brought for the war. This commander of the army was not present in the whole of Russia. He was sent to Moscow as the supreme commander. This army set up a front near the village of Magron, 132 kilometers away from Moscow, and started waiting for Napoleon. Now there was only one wall between the army and Napoleon, and that was General Photios of the French army. When Napoleon came to know that the army had made preparations for the battle, his happiness knew no bounds. He wanted that the enemy should come forward for a fierce battle, and he would destroy him. He encouraged his duped army and moved forward and reached the city. Then, on September 7, 1812, a decision was indeed given, but the decision of Napoleon's will was probably not for that war. Music, for the Battle of the City, the French emperor had 130,000 soldiers and 587 guns. The Russians had $10,000 and 640 guns, i.e. the strength of both the armies. There was a very small difference in the number and strength, but the Rishis had an advantage that their soldiers were mostly strong, while the French soldiers had come after traveling from hundreds of kilometers away and were tired. Another problem with the French was that their soldiers were sick, and due to their illness, they were not able to make the right decision. According to the French, this was not a decision for the Khinjan, but still Napoleon started the war. The situation of the battlefield was that Moscow was lying in between the two armies. The Rishi army had taken positions on the small hills and plains along the banks of the river Mosk. Before the enemy could reach them, they made many castles of mud and used to make topan nazim in them. There was also a big fort in the center of the Rishi army in which there were fewer soldiers. Napoleon had at least 18,000 soldiers on the battlefield. Apart from this, he had also made safe fronts for his soldiers along with his daisy line. Instead of planning for this battle, Napoleon ordered his army to attack the enemy positions from the front. Such an attack was dangerous because the enemy could cause heavy casualties to the French corps by firing from their safe positions. One of Napoleon's generals advised him not to attack the front. "Give me 40,000 soldiers. I will try to surround the enemy from behind by crossing the river at night." But Napoleon refused. On September 7th at 6 o'clock, the French started bombing the Russians. They also responded to this in the army. After this, the French army attacked the enemy from the front by crossing the river, but it was not easy to capture the enemy positions. The soldiers were continuously firing bullets from their daisy positions, and especially the clay pots. When the French army reached Garib, Rishi started firing bullets at them, and the French army's jaws were blown away. The French army commanders who were present in the field also started getting worried about why Napoleon was not with them in the next front. Any decision was being taken for them because a lot of time had passed in reaching the message to the emperor and then getting his reply. One of his commanders angrily told his soldiers that if the emperor was not capable of commanding, then let Lot Jane and us fight together. But Napoleon was neither leaving the command nor was he leading the army properly. He had also become irritable and bad-tempered. He was not able to tolerate any talk of failure. The result of this was that the French started facing great difficulties. Due to the increasing casualties, the French forces also had to look into the battlefield before time. Finally, the French reached right on top of the Rishi front after suffering heavy casualties. The soldiers of both sides got crowded with each other, and there the French started killing each other with bayonets. The French soldiers were fighting with such zeal that even Napoleon, standing far away and watching through binoculars, was forced to praise them. He told his close friend that the French were behaving like fighting machines and not humans. They had become such bananas that only popsicle bullets could destroy them. But even the might of the French army could not stand the pace of the French army. The French were suffering heavy losses due to overdoing it on their weak positions. The French had suffered more losses in the beginning of the battle, but at the end of the battle the French lost a lot of lives. By evening, 44,000 French and 35,000 French soldiers had been killed in the battlefield, that is, 790,007,9000 soldiers had been killed in a single day. The French soldiers had been pushed far behind their front line, and the market was in shambles. The result was looking heavy for the French, but Napoleon could not get the decision he was looking for. The reason for this was that the lead forces, which were kept in reserve, were not sent to fight. The loss to the French was that the Russian army, which had the power to completely destroy, retreated. When the sun rose on September 7th, the Russian General Koda withdrew his army towards Moscow. The French army kept watching the Russians going from their position, but they could not stop them because the day-long battle had exhausted their already tired soldiers. The Russian army had once again clearly retreated. So friends, you are seeing the memorial of the Golden Dome and Selim, which has been built in the memory of this battle. Apart from this, other memorials are also present here, on which the Russian army is sitting spread out on the rickshaw, was still fully united and ready to attack, despite the pressure. This commander, the Supreme Commander General Kodajap, was still eager for victory. After retreating from the battlefield, he held a meeting with his commanders in a village near Moscow. In this meeting, without taking permission from the sage Shahenshah, he took a brave step on his own and decided not to capture Moscow. Instead, leaving the city empty, he retreated to a new place and started to take a position. He thought that in this way he could tire out the French army. Now it so happened that he actually passed through the east of Moscow city and left the field clear for the French army, which was coming from the west. On September 14th, Napoleon Bonaparte arrived with his army, but when he reached there, such a large city was empty. Out of the total population of the city, only 25,000 people were present there, including most of them were wounded soldiers of foreign countries, or those Zarambas people who were not allowed to leave the city. The tired French soldiers were now happy that they would get rest and food in Moscow, but the soldiers had made arrangements inside their own city to know what the enemy does. Friends, before leaving the city, the Moscow Sage's banner and Top Gun had given gunpowder to some people and hid them in the city, so that after Napoleon's arrival, they could burn the city. This was so that the French would not get the city but the city itself, and if they could not escape from here, then these people set fire to many places in Moscow with gunpowder and escaped the very next day. After 3 days of efforts, the French army took control of Moscow, but a large part of the city had been burnt. Some of the children among the French soldiers were in a hurry, but they could return home for Moscow. After capturing the city, they were tired, but they were thinking that if they keep Moscow, then this emperor would be defeated. They will definitely come to him begging for peace, but friends, this did not happen even the third time. Alexander was in no hurry to take Moscow back. He was waiting for the storm. On one occasion, he also said that the best commander of my army is General Winter, and this storm is starting now, and there will be no more promises with Napoleon. General Winter will fight Napoleon, that is, the storm is really friends. The snowy season of Russia was about to start, and the more Napoleon delayed in getting out of Moscow, the closer the snowfall was. Napoleon stayed in Moscow from September 14th to October 19th and fell into the trap of the Russians. Now, when snow started falling in Moscow, Napoleon got scared. You already know that Napoleon had not planned to spend much time in Russia, so his army did not have proper arrangements to protect itself from the storm, and even today it did not have any clothes. He did not find any such society in Moscow that he could protect so much. The French army was now empty-handed, and Napoleon had only one option left: to give up the dream of surrendering to Russia and worry about saving his army. He took a quick decision, and with his army, he ran away from Moscow to Lithuania towards the Millennium City, which was his camp. He wanted to get out of this dangerous area as soon as possible, but there was no time for this effort. It was a terrifying challenge. They had to travel 930 kilometers during heavy snowfall with very little food and water. This journey was such that they had to bear the attacks of the bloodthirsty Russians from all sides. So, when Napoleon left, his daughter Kashi and the army also started to lose money. Music on October 19th, about 100,000 French soldiers started their journey from Moscow to Milan, but it was less of an army and more of a convoy of traitors. In fact, the French soldiers had committed a huge massacre in Moscow during the siege itself. These soldiers had taken away the goods which the citizens of Moscow could not take with them. Every French soldier had accumulated so much wealth that it was a challenge to manage it. But all this wealth was neither sufficient to fill their stomachs nor enough to keep them happy in winters. On the contrary, it was as if this wealth had become a burden for them. This wealth had also reduced the speed of their journey. The lazy people also got a chance to pounce on the wounds of this weak and sluggish soldier, like flies of the city. It was happening now that on one side General Koda, who was sitting near Bosco, was behind them. Then the Russian rural Kawali Jamju and the local Malaysians also started to clear their hands on the fleeing French army. It means that from Moscow to Vilnius, such a massacre of French soldiers took place, examples of which are hard to find. At least, the French soldiers started lashing out. For some time, the French soldiers were killed. The army tried to fight the Russians, and there were a few tough battles, but each time the French army suffered. With every failure, the speed of the French army's escape increased. Along with this, the discipline of the army also vanished completely. And Surendra used to do it, but the Rakians did not have enough food to feed so many prisoners along with themselves. Hence, the French army left behind many wounded and injured soldiers on the way at the Mokama. The heavy trucks and vehicles carrying the soldiers were also either destroyed or left behind by the continuous attacks of the enemy. The French army was no longer a convoy but had become a convoy of small and big pieces in countless groups. His group, which is in the hands of the enemy, is my caste. Those who save the enemy leave the corpses of their comrades and go ahead. Thousands of corpses are buried under the snow. Snowfall, mines, cold up to 20 degrees, and he was not with the enemy, he was not with his own army. He was on the verge of getting arrested by the enemy a couple of times, after which he fled towards France in front of the army by sitting in a vehicle which travels at a high speed on snow, called Slash. Friends, it has been the tradition of Napoleon Bonaparte that he would often leave his army on this opportunity and run towards France. Before this, he had done the same during the war against the Ottoman Empire, and he had left his soldiers surrounded by the enemy in Egypt and escaped himself so that he could become the emperor. He is also accused that during the war in the evening, He poisoned some of his enemy soldiers in the city of Jaffa so that they had to be taken away. A sentence is also attributed to him that I care for people only till the time till then he was proving to be of no use to me. Similarly, he had escaped from Russia, also leaving his soldiers behind, because now these soldiers were not capable of defeating him. After Napoleon's escape, when his army entered Venice and got some food to eat, the hungry soldiers lost their senses and ate so much food that hundreds of soldiers died due to overeating. Thousands of French soldiers who had somehow reached the city, their food also accompanied them till here, and that too became a problem. Now, the result of Napoleon's Russia combine was such that out of 5.5 lakhs of great soldiers, only 20,000 soldiers were returning alive to Poland. Thousands of injured French were still in hospitals, and they could not reach Poland. When some other French soldiers also got involved in this, they started throwing these injured soldiers out of the windows of the hospitals. Many French soldiers died in this way. When the rest of them ran out of treatment and were not able to get treatment, they were collected at one place, and the pile of dead bodies became as high as a 3-story building. Many of these dead bodies were thrown into the river. Thousands of soldiers were buried in unused graves. There were so many that even today in the Russian archives, there are still graves of the French and the soldiers killed in this war, and it is not known from the bones of these soldiers who were French and who were rishis. Both seem to be humans. Your friends, whenever one of these soldiers is found, he is buried with full honor. There are also speeches in which some people from the French and the children of these soldiers participate. You must have read about Russia or heard about it. Jim Naval is a part of the story of this war. So why not? The soldiers had to face a lot of devastation in Russia. In this, the weather was more affected by the heat than the enemy, and the rest were destroyed by the cold while returning from Moscow. Apart from this, Napoleon's stubbornness to make Russia bow down, and wrong military tactics and speeches also became the reason for the destruction. So, friends, Napoleon escaped from Russia and reached Persia directly. Here he tried to gather the army, but now his power of failure was broken. Most of the armies of Europe now under the command of Britain and Russia waged war against Napoleon. French Empire also started fighting. During the next 1 year, Napoleon faced every problem in Europe and French Empire is collapsing. French Emperor's mother also left everything. The elite powers of Britain and Russia arrested him and put him in a British warship and sent him to the island of Italy. After all, the Emperor of France was murdered. His arms were raised in the army. His brother was made the new French emperor with the title of Rohit XVIII. Napoleon remained imprisoned for many months, but he was determined to regain the rule of France. He was restless, and he joined the population with him, and with their help he prepared some boats and small ships. After this, he reached France in this ship with his 1,000 soldiers in February 1815. He landed at Salabad War in France, and from there started marching towards Paris. The King of France sent a military squad to stop him. This squad was already under Napoleon's command, so all the soldiers knew Napoleon. When they reached in front of Napoleon's small force and they aimed their guns at Napoleon, Napoleon was riding a horse at that time, and facing the soldiers he said, "I am standing in front of you. If you want to kill your emperor, then do it." On hearing this, the soldiers shouted the slogan, "Emperor Zindabad." Then he started marching towards Paris. On the way, wherever he entered, French soldiers and people joined him and took up positions on the nearby roads. But the French heir might have won over the companions, but they were not won over by the world tractor. They created a new history against Napoleon and started the war again. In response, Napoleon also marched with his army and reached Belgium. Then, in the Belgian area of Waterloo, Napoleon fought the last blow of his life against the British. Whom did this last blow immortalize? The French emperor or the English? What happened to Napoleon? We will show you all this, friends, but the next and the last thing is that this field which you are seeing is about 20 kilometers away from the capital of Versailles in Belgium. 200 years ago, in this very field, a decisive battle of history was fought. Keeping in mind this place, this battle is called the Battle of Waterloo. In this battle, on one side was the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, who was trying to save his throne. Napoleon Bonaparte had come to fight the last battle of the French Empire. His opponent was British commander Arthur Wellesley, who was more famous by his title Duke of Wellington. Both were great commanders of their time, and both had the most powerful army. But Napoleon Bonaparte was making a mistake. That mistake was to underestimate the enemy. He used to call Valentine a soldier general, by which he meant to say that Valentine was a man of the rank of a soldier, whom Britain had mistakenly made a commander. Napoleon reprimanded his commander, who had suffered at the hands of the British before Waterloo, and said that if Valentine has defeated you in the past, it does not mean that he is a good general and can defeat any other allied general. If you believe me, Vulcan is a useless general and the English soldiers do not even know how to fight. So, consider the Battle of Waterloo as if we are going to have breakfast. That is, this battle is no less difficult for me than breakfast. So, is this battle really auspicious for Napoleon? The Battle of the Soldier General and the Emperor General proved to be the most deadly battle of modern history. Why is it that I am Faisal Raj and watch Suno Janu's miniseries? We will show you all this. Music. On the auspicious day of June 18, 1853, Napoleon mounted his horse and went out with his army and men to the battlefield. Whatever he saw proved to be a great time for him. Due to the rain that continued throughout the night, the battlefield was filled with mud. The chances of the French artillery getting much success in the battlefield were now less because there was a special thing in the bullets of the French artillery, and after hitting the ground, these bullets would bounce like a ball and move forward in the enemy's ranks and reach inside the enemy. That is, even if the enemy was standing far away, these bullets would reach them by bouncing, but in a field full of mud, this ability of theirs was obviously reduced. Apart from this, another problem for Napoleon was that he himself was very ill. Friends, the house you are seeing at Waterloo was Napoleon's last headquarters, and he spent the last night in this house before the battle. It is said that he kept vomiting the whole night and died in less than 4 hours. So, considering his health, he should have been in the hospital instead of the battlefield. But bad luck had brought him to the battlefield, and here he had to fight in such a condition that he did not even have fever. Why, fellows, Napoleon Bonaparte was now facing two armies at the same time. One army was the British Army, which was present in Sewell in the north, right in front of him under the command of New Valentine. Apart from the British, the Netherlands Army was also present in large numbers. The number of this army was 68,000. But there was another army as well, and this second army was the Second Army of Napoleon Bonaparte. This army was present in the east and the Middle East about 15 to 20 kilometers away. You can also find German soldiers. Google, this was the area where Germany was established. There were also soldiers with whom he had to fight. Their number was around 50,000. Its command was commanding the Roshan forces. 2 days before, on June 16th, Napoleon had forced them to flee by giving a fierce attack. Then Napoleon had sent his commander General Rucci with 34,000 soldiers behind this defeated Roshan army. Napoleon had instructed his commander to push the Roshan army so far away that it could not reach to help the British. But what happened was that these commanders of Napoleon proved incompetent. They lost their way and could not find the location of the Roshan army. They were camped very close and had the power to reach to help New Valentine at any time. To face these two forces, Napoleon had only 72,000 soldiers at that time. The situation of the battlefield was also not ideal for Napoleon Bonaparte. Firstly, due to rain, it was difficult to move the artillery, but the second most important thing was the wild planning of British commander Valentine. The choice of the battle was not made by Napoleon, but by the British commander himself. The reason for this was that the victory of the British army soldiers was neither fierce, nor was it any less than the French. Valentine knew that if he attacked Napoleon first with this artillery and this army, then he would be destined for trouble. That is why he decided to find such a place for the battle, where he could make his army stand in a safe position. The field of Waterloo seemed to be his favorite place. That is why he camped here. The specialty of Waterloo was that in a part of its vast field, the volunteers of Dieu had hidden most of their army behind this rope. The French army was standing in front of Dieu, and they were not able to see the British army. That is, they were not able to see the enemy's antics and actions completely. Friends, it is a big disadvantage in the battlefield that the enemy is out of your sight. It is out of sight, and you cannot understand its movement. Then it was like this that some British soldiers had taken control of Dilwyn in front of their army. From here they could easily see the French army and were also keeping their commanders informed about their movement. Their army was hidden behind Dilwyn, ahead of it on the right side, and in the center there were some rural muckinath and farmhouses. They had also taken them under their control. They had deployed some army squads at both these places. There were about 400 soldiers on the central position. These soldiers were German and were employed in the British army. Their position was such because, without occupying this place, Britain could not attack the enemy with full force without taking the French army's revenge. So, friends, now the situation was that the British army brothers had taken a strong position. German soldiers were also present to help them. The soldiers could reach the water loop in a few hours. The battlefield had already known that it was filled with mud. Here the magic power of the bullets and their shells had diminished. Napoleon himself was also insecure, that is, at least from the French point of view. This was not a historical station to fight the war, but then he was going for breakfast to fight the war, but the reason for this has already been known in the beginning of the video. Napoleon neither considered Valentine a good commander, nor in his eyes the soldiers in the vessel were a professional army. You know that they did not give more importance to this battle than a light breakfast. Even after seeing the tremendous strength of the soldiers, they were not convinced by the strength of the enemy. On the contrary, from this visible position, they were taking the meaning that the enemy is very weak and is scared. I will defeat him in a jiffy. They were sure that before the arrival of the male army, wherever it was, they would have given a head to the soldiers in the vessel. After this they would deal with the Russian army alone, which would not be any less difficult, so the conditions would not have been favorable. Despite not having favorable conditions, Napoleon decided to fight on this day. Due to illness, he could not stand in the battlefield for long. Therefore, in between, he used to take rest at the Maidan to take stock of the roads. The leader also used to go to the battlefield. In his absence, the scenery was music. On the auspicious day of June 18th, at 11:35, the French storm opened fire on the British enemies and most of them were lying down, hiding behind the Dilwyn, due to which the bullets were passing over their heads and going away. The commander had kept his army away from firing so that his ammunition would not be wasted, and we were very few on the spot. After some fear, the French troops also fell silent. After this, Napoleon Bonaparte ordered some infantry divisions to attack the small farmhouse present in the field where the German troops were stationed. The French army attacked both the farms one after the other, but had to face a fierce battle at both the places. The British army fought hard against the French at the farmhouse on the left side, which was called Hawkward Farm. The French forces entered the courtyard of the farm at one point, but the British forces pushed them out once. Napoleon repeatedly sent military squads towards this farmhouse. Firing was also done, but till the end of the battle, the French could not completely capture this position. Hundreds of French lives were being lost in vain. Friends, the situation was the same in the center farm as well. There too the French were not succeeding. The central farm was captured by the German forces. The French were given 2 times, and the French attacked again. The French army attacked again after getting scared. Many soldiers were killed from both sides. After a fierce battle, the French army entered the fort. Out of 400 Germans, only 42 soldiers escaped to save their lives and joined the British army behind the Dilwyn. The French flag started flying on this fort. When the battle for the capture of the fort was going on, at that time a direct war had also started between the British and French forces. What happened was that the right part of Napoleon's army started moving towards the British force in front of them, which was standing on top of the Dilwyn. The British opened fire on this force and caused considerable damage to it, but these soldiers of the French army kept moving forward. These soldiers were moving back and forth in rows of deadlock, but the British squads that were in front of them had the advantage that all the soldiers in the fort could target the enemy with their guns at the same time, while the enemy's soldiers could not take aim at them. The French army, which was smaller than a single line, found it difficult to fire like this. The soldiers coming behind in their ranks could not fire until the soldier in front got into the fire. Because of the single line, the firing capability of the British soldier was more than that of the enemy. So, as soon as the French came in, the soldiers started firing heavily. They started throwing bullets at them. The French also started firing. A bullet hit the British commander Thomas Inspector standing ahead, and he got stuck there. So their soldiers did not leave the field and kept firing continuously. In place of their soldiers who got killed, the army used to come from behind the line. In doing so, they soon became heavy on the enemy. The French left many lichens and started running down in reverse steps. When the situation was good, they immediately ordered their horseman Dustin to attack the running French. Most of them belonged to the British Sheila of Scotland. First of all, he attacked the fleeing French with a heavy hand. Then he moved forward, tearing through their ranks. During this, he also snatched a flag of the French army on which an eagle was engraved. This was the special symbol of Napoleon's army. Then the French, standing at a distance, moved towards the fort. This time moving forward, they were saying "Scotland forever." Thomson made a painting on this by the name of "Scotland Forever." In his enthusiasm, he got separated from the army on his own and reached a place far away where French soldiers were present on all sides, and he was alone. Napoleon Bonaparte took advantage of this opportunity and ordered his horsemen to counterattack the enemy. These horsemen attacked the Scottish cavalry and caused them damage. Out of the 1,000 French cavalry, i.e. out of the Scottish 1,000 to 1,000 were seriously injured, and the rest fled. If in the fierce attack of the French, then a part of the fort was destroyed, but this loss was not very big. There were many other squads of the cavalry at different places in the battlefield. His strength was enough to destroy the enemy army. As soon as the enemy's cavalry started, Napoleon went some distance behind his army to assess the possible arrival of the army. From his new position, he was observing the paths of the enemy through binoculars from where it was possible to proceed. Now his Badrinaut started proving to be his enemy. At around 2 p.m., he saw Chandrapurisha Guswar Dustin coming from the east towards Mashi. He started preparing to stop him. Meanwhile, in the absence of Napoleon, the commander-in-chief was continuing the fight with the enemy army. He sent 12,000 cavalry soldiers to attack the enemy's center. These cavalry squads attacked the enemy. The soldiers jumped from the horsemen and attacked the British soldiers standing behind. Seeing the horsemen coming, General Volontier immediately made his soldiers stand in a square formation. This was the same formation which Napoleon Bonaparte used in the past, and especially in Egypt, to keep the enemies away. So the British soldiers immediately made the same square formation. Then, with the help of their bullets and bayonets, they foiled the first attack of the horsemen. When the horsemen could not break any square, Commander Menshiro pushed them back. After this, the French army once again started a pure bombardment on the enemy. The ability of the French army to jump had reduced due to the mud on the ground. Still, they started proving to be very effective. The square dusters were again ordered to attack. The French army once again attacked the enemy and kept trying to break their enemy's defenses. But this time also they failed and returned to their own force. But this much definitely happened, that countless British soldiers were injured. They were already exhausted and did not have the strength to withstand the attack. If the French army had taken a decision at that time, the army of Potts would have retreated. But the French general could not use missiles on the enemy at that time. Napoleon was also not present there, who could take a decision for the first time. Therefore, the army of Potts got a chance to take advantage. Meanwhile, it so happened that Emperor Napoleon, who was reviewing the Porcian army, sent his 20,000 soldiers in the way of the army of Potts. He took the command of the army back from General Michel. He wanted to fight the army of Potts with full power by playing with the army of Potts from behind. Therefore, he gave the order to attack. The army of Potts had never lost a battle till date. Napoleon was sure that this force would easily push the army of Potts back. The army of Potts started moving towards the army of Potts. On the other hand, when the volunteers of Jiao saw the old gods moving towards their ranks, they understood that Napoleon, they have already played their decision. They gave their 1,400 soldiers the right to climb Dilwyn and lie down very close to its roof, so that the old guards could not see them. These soldiers did the same. In the meantime, the soldiers of the old guard had reached near Dilwyn on foot. The market of the old guards was looking empty to them. So when they were about to climb Dilwyn, suddenly the soldiers in the pots hidden behind the Dilwyn stood up and started firing. Hundreds of old guards got caught in the first firing. The rest of the soldiers tried to answer the firing by taking position, but during this time the British command also played its master move. They brought down their entire army from Dillon and ordered them to attack the Old Guard. First, the 1,400 soldiers in the front started running towards the enemy, and behind them were thousands of soldiers in the pots. They straightened their guns and bayonets, came out from the Demon side, and ran towards the Old Guards. Seeing such a large army attacking them together, the Old Guards got scared. The French started running away from there by putting a gun on their head. Napoleon Bonaparte also ran away, leaving his army behind, but before running away, he ordered his artillery to bombard the enemy so that the speed of the enemy slows down and the soldiers could run away from the general. So, as per the order, the French artillery kept on firing even after facing the pain. The French were moving towards the enemy from the opposite side, and the French army was overpowering them from the rear. In such a situation, if the French soldiers had stood firm in the battlefield, then the entire army would have been cut like carrots and radishes between the two enemy forces. The French started running away by putting a gun on their head. Napoleon Bonaparte also ran away, leaving his army behind, but before running away, he ordered his artillery to bombard the enemy so that the speed of the enemy slows down and the emperor could run away to save his life from the general. So, as per the order, the French artillery kept firing even after facing the pain. Many French soldiers also got caught in the firing who were on the battlefield while the British were trying to escape from the Battle of Waterloo. There were some French infantry units with food who stood in the fight of the British and the British till the end, but in the end all of them were either killed or had to surrender. In the Battle of Waterloo, every soldier of the British forces was wounded or missing, while Napoleon's army suffered a loss of more than 40,000 soldiers. Out of these, about 7,000 soldiers were captured, while the rest were wounded or missing. The dead were buried in the graves of the British, and the French army gathered and celebrated their victory with great enthusiasm. While the British forces were celebrating, more than 30,000 French soldiers were running away to save their lives along with their Emperor Napoleon and were heading towards Paris. From Waterloo to Paris, Napoleon's story did not stop on the path of this fast-moving army, but the present was not there. It was following them at such a speed, and they also reached Paris and escaped. And he reached directly to the city of Sully, Rochefort. From here, he wanted to go to America by sea so that he could achieve political power, but the chicken thieves ruined his dream. They blocked the path of Napoleon. Napoleon, accepting the hardship, imprisoned Surrendra here. The British arrested him and imprisoned him. When the English ship carrying them anchored on the Baronnie shore, a sea of people gathered to see the prisoner Emperor Napoleon. Napoleon was thinking that he would live the rest of his life in Britain as a common citizen, but the plane of the British music. I am curious, fellows. You have already known how Napoleon had escaped from Allahabad district during his first exile and reached France. The British government did not want to take any such risk this time. The British decided to send Napoleon far away from where he could return to France. This small island that you are seeing now is in the Atlantic Ocean between Africa and South America. It is called Saint Helena. Napoleon was exiled on this shore. By looking at its location, you must have understood that this place is very far from Baronnie and France. Napoleon spent his last days in exile on Isle in anonymity and fighting with illness. Here he was given a house to live in, which was called Log. In this house, Napoleon also wrote his memoirs. Napoleon got his memories written. He had died in the field of cricket, so a doctor was also provided to him by the British. But despite the treatment, his health was not improving. Perhaps the depression of his condition and his loss of his life had left him incapable of fighting the disease. Napoleon Bonaparte died on May 5, 1821. His age was 51 years. The British got his body post-mortem done, and it came to light that he had stomach cancer. Friends, Napoleon was a famous person. So the story of his death has not ended till date. It is still to some extent that the British had poisoned him, or he really died of cancer. It is said that arsenic poison was used to kill him. 19 snow poisoning was done, and all this was given to him by mixing it in some food or drink. Then the medical experts and historians also have an opinion which is against this. They believe that Napoleon died due to the evil stomach cancer of the mother. Cancer has nothing to do with poison. Their argument is that Napoleon's father and one of his sisters also died of the same disease, That is, according to experts, stomach cancer was common in Napoleon's family. It was a common disease. After Napoleon Bonaparte's death, his dead body was preserved and buried in the grave at Sendai, but 19 years later, in 1840, on the request of the French government, his body was taken out of the grave. When his coffin was opened, his body was found in a very good condition. His coffin was brought to the shore in the form of a procession. On this occasion, soldiers were standing on both sides of the road who had given Napoleon the peace. Then his coffin was taken to France in a foreign ship. It was received by the French government. Then his last rites were performed in Paris, with full government permission. His body was placed in this new white marble tomb. It was also made safe by putting a grill around it. Inside it, flowers were placed. There are also flower beds, and apart from this, the house in which he spent his last days has also been kept safe. The flag of France is also hoisted in this city of New Zealand, but this island is still included in Britain's and its colonies. It is not a part of France. Friends, Napoleon died in this way on a small island in District Busty, but the British commander who gave him life became the hero of New Cologne, Britain. He died twice in 1828 and then in 1834. Friends, in your opinion, who among Napoleon Bonaparte and Du Valentine was really the greater commander, and who among them was the greatest commander? D was the right side of history. Do tell us in the comments if you have ever visited the field of Belgium, or we can show you from there. Friends, all the historical impacts of this battlefield have been preserved till date. The farmhouses for which the battle was fought in the battlefield are also visible. Now, a Masuri hill has also been built here, on which the statue of a lion is kept as a memorial. That is why this hill is also called Lion's Mom or Baber Shur Kipahari. The building, which was built before Waterloo, has also been converted into a museum. Apart from this, Waterloo railway station is also used as a hill in the Marquess of London, the British Empire. That means this was such a big battle that it also influenced the English grammar.
Why?
The fourth mini-season of my General John Bottles on the story of Napoleon ends here. More historical stories of this series will come in front of you. Do watch them. If you have not seen them from the beginning, then you can touch here now. And here is the great general where is the end of Khalid and the war with Iran.